You hear it before you see it. The slow toll of a temple bell, rolling through mist like a heartbeat muffled by snow. The air bites your throat. The incense stings your eyes. Around you, kneeling boys chant in perfect rhythm, their voices thin, fragile, like candle flames waiting to be extinguished. You think you've entered a sanctuary, but this is not a place of peace. It is a stage, and innocence is the offering. Before we begin, take a moment to breathe in this stillness. From wherever you're watching, Tokyo, London, Delhi, Sao Paulo, type where you are in the comments. It's surreal that across centuries and continents, we gather here to uncover what history tried to bury. If you're drawn to these forgotten stories of faith and fear, hit that like button and subscribe. You'll help us bring more of the past out of the shadows. When dawn breaks over Mount Koya, the snow glows blue against the cedar trunks. Inside the temple, the monks move like spirits, their saffron robes brushing the floor in deliberate silence. At the center of the hall stands a boy no older than 12. His head is half-shaved, his remaining hair is oiled and tied in a silken knot. He holds a fan of white paper before his face, trembling as the abbot raises a hand in blessing. The ceremony is not of ordination, it is of possession. The boy is now Chigo, an attendant chosen to serve both the body and spirit of his master. In the candlelight, his pale skin gleams like polished ivory. The monks call it purity. The poets call it beauty. The scrolls describe it as divine companionship, the merging of virtue and devotion. Yet behind every elegant phrase lies the same quiet transaction. Obedience in exchange for protection, affection disguised as grace. The temple chants grow louder, but their meaning slips into something else. Part prayer, part incantation to justify what cannot be named. The history of the Chigo is written not in official doctrine, but in the margins of sutras and the forbidden poems hidden beneath floorboards. In one surviving verse from the 14th century, a monk confesses, "My Chigo smiles as Amida smiles. His eyes guide me to salvation." Scholars debate whether it was metaphor or confession, but the truth lingers in the rhythm of the words. Salvation in these halls came at a cost measured in innocence. As the boy walks the corridors, he passes paintings of paradise. Gold Buddhas smiling with eternal calm. He does not yet know that those same smiles will follow him through years of silent service. He will pour tea. He will recite the Heart Sutra. And when the candles dim, he will kneel beside his master's futon, listening to the wind moan against the paper walls. Outside, snow falls on the graves of men who called themselves holy. Inside, the silence grows unbearable. How did faith become hunger? How did enlightenment turn into obsession? The monks of Mount Koya believed that beauty led to transcendence, that the love of a pure boy could elevate the soul. Desire, they said, was not sin if it illuminated compassion. So they painted their indulgence in gold and scripture, convinced the gods would forgive what the world could not see. One winter, a visiting noble recorded a ceremony where a Chigo was paraded through the temple garden, dressed in robes of crimson and silver, his face powdered white. Monks followed, singing hymns to Canon, the Bodhisattva of mercy. The noble's diary ends with a single line, "And thus mercy wore the face of a child." The boy in that account vanished from the record soon after. But his story repeats again and again across the centuries. Different names, same silence. Some fled, most stayed. The few who spoke out found themselves exiled, branded heretics for daring to accuse holy men. In one surviving scroll from Nara, an anonymous monk wrote, "We have mistaken the scent of incense for the stench of sin." The ink ends abruptly, as if the writer feared what followed. The illusion of purity held for generations. Pilgrims came to Mount Koya seeking enlightenment, unaware that beneath the golden altars lay a hierarchy of possession. The Chigo were treated as both ornaments and offerings, trained in music, calligraphy, and obedience. To the outside world, they were symbols of spiritual beauty. To the monks, they were mirrors of their own corruption. Night falls again on the mountain. The same bell tolls, carrying its echo down the valleys. In the dormitory, a young Chigo stares at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the wood with his eyes. He listens to the footsteps approaching, measured, inevitable. He closes his eyes and whispers the Nembutsu, praying for rebirth in the Pure Land, a world without walls or masters. The door slides open. A shadow fills the frame. The candles flicker and die. Tomorrow, when the pilgrims arrive, they will see only serenity, the gardens raked to perfection, the monks bowing in quiet harmony. No one will speak of the Chigo. No one ever does. But if you listen closely, past the chants and the snow and the ringing bell, you might still hear it, the faint, trembling breath of the forgotten. And beyond the temple walls, another world waits to claim them. The sword catches the morning light, splitting it into a razor's gleam. A samurai's hand moves slowly, rhythmically over the blade's length, polishing not only steel but the reflection within it. In that reflection stands a boy, barefoot, trembling, head bowed. The samurai lifts the sword slightly, angling it so the boy's face aligns perfectly with his own. "A warrior," he murmurs, "must be beautiful in soul and form alike." The blade sings softly as it slides back into its sheath. What began in the temples now bleeds into the castles of feudal Japan. The Chigo have become wakashu, no longer acolytes but pages, attendants, and symbols of aesthetic devotion among the samurai class. The monks claimed beauty could purify the soul. The warriors twisted it into an oath of control. In the shadow of war banners and lacquered armor, affection becomes hierarchy, and loyalty becomes possession. In the year 1572, a diary belonging to a retainer of the Takeda clan describes the custom plainly. "My lord's love is my honor, my obedience his peace. To serve him with body and sword alike, this is the way of men." Historians debate whether this way was romantic, paternal, or coercive. But beneath the poetry lies the same transaction that once echoed through temple halls. Submission masked as devotion. The training grounds of Kai Province smell of sweat and pine resin. The clang of wooden swords echoes through the cold air. Young wakashu, their hair tied in the distinctive forelock of youth, practice before their masters. Their movements are sharp, graceful, precise. Yet the samurai watching them are not only judging their technique, they are judging composure, beauty of motion, restraint of gaze. To falter is to invite humiliation. To resist is to court ruin. "Hold your stance," one lord commands. The boy's arms quiver under the strain. A drop of blood beads where bamboo strikes skin. The lord steps forward, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Pain is the price of loyalty," he whispers, "and loyalty is the only freedom we have." Across Japan's warring provinces, the wakashu became emblems of refinement amid brutality. In Edo and Kyoto, their faces appeared in painted scrolls, delicate features framed by strands of black hair, eyes lowered in humility. To the outside world, it was art, the harmony of youth and valor. But behind the screens, those same portraits hung in the chambers of men who ruled by sword and silence. In the letters exchanged between daimyo and their attendants, coded language concealed the unspoken. The phrase, "to share sake under the moon," meant more than companionship. A gift of silk meant a promise. A poem about cherry blossoms falling before their time often meant farewell to a boy dismissed for growing too old. When his forelock was cut, a mark of adulthood, his usefulness ended. Some were married off. Others were sent to monasteries, returning the cycle to where it began. The most haunting record comes from a young retainer whose name is lost to time. His diary, found centuries later in a burned estate, tells of a single night during the siege of Nagashino. the Lord called for me as arrows fell outside. He said the gods envy what men possess. I asked what he meant. He smiled and said, "Your loyalty, your youth. These are my armor." When I woke, his armor was gone, and I was dressed in his robe. He died before sunrise. I live still, though I do not know why. What did the samurai see in these boys? Perhaps the reflection of what they had sacrificed: innocence, tenderness, the part of the soul that still believed in mercy. The wakashu became vessels for a beauty the warriors could no longer find in themselves. And so, through ritual and secrecy, the old temple sins were reforged in steel. In Edo's later piece, the tradition continued in whispers. Theater troupes, patronized by samurai, recruited wakashu actors for roles that blurred gender and class alike. A visiting Dutch observer wrote of a performance in 1649. The youths are admired as flowers, admired too well, I fear, by their masters. The code of the warrior is a strange scripture, where desire is discipline. By the 18th century, the shogunate outlawed such relationships under threat of disgrace. Yet by then, the damage was woven into the fabric of honor itself. The wakashu ideal, the fragile beauty beneath the armor, lingered in art, poetry, and memory. It was the echo of a nation's guilt disguised as nostalgia. As the centuries turned, the samurai vanished, their swords melted into relics of empire. But the stories remained, painted on folding screens, whispered through generations, half erased, yet never gone. In one surviving portrait from the early Tokugawa era, a samurai kneels before his wakashu companion. The boy's eyes are calm, but his hand tightens on the hilt of a small dagger. It is not fear that fills his gaze. It is decision. A single stroke could free him. A single silence could damn him. Outside, the cherry blossoms fall in the courtyard, soundless as snow. Inside, the warrior and the boy remain locked in a moment that history refused to see. Honor and obedience, love and violence, forever reflected in the same polished steel. And somewhere beyond that reflection, the next generation waits, ready to trade temples and castles for something even darker. The paper lanterns sway like captive moons, their red glow rippling over narrow canals and lacquered bridges. The air smells of sake, smoke, and perfume. Somewhere, a shamisen plucks a melancholy tune, and the laughter that follows sounds rehearsed, hollow, gilded, beautiful. In Edo's pleasure quarters, sin is an art form, and art is a mask for despair. The kagema walk among the courtesans now, boys painted in white rice powder, their lips crimson as spilled wine, their steps practiced in the soft shuffle of a lure. What began in temples as pious corruption and in castles as feudal ritual has now become industry. The brothel owners call it entertainment. The government calls it taxation. The city calls it the floating world, ukiyo, a place where sorrow drowns beneath pleasure. But for the boys behind the painted screens, there is no floating, only sinking. Through the narrow streets of Yoshiwara, paper doors slide open and shut in endless rhythm. Patrons drift through like moths drawn to flame, their laughter spilling into the night. The kagama bow, low, sleeves trailing, their androgynous beauty carefully curated. Hair oiled and tied high, eyebrows shaved thin, they mimic the grace once reserved for noble women. A single look, a single smile is enough to lure a client. One foreign merchant in 1799 wrote, "They sell youth as they sell silk, and both lose value with the crease of time." He did not know the half of it, for behind the painted walls the boys' contracts are written not in ink, but in blood and years. Bound to the yujo-ya, the houses of pleasure until their debts are repaid, which is to say, never. In one small brothel near Shin-Yoshiwara's main gate, a boy named Ren kneels before the mirror. His handler paints a streak of vermilion across his mouth, saying softly, "Smile with your eyes, not your lips." the patrons like mystery. Outside, drums begin to beat. The festival has started. Ren takes a breath, watching his reflection tremble. "Do you remember the temple?" his handler murmurs. Ren hesitates. No, he lies. But in the rhythm of the drums, he hears the echo of bells. By the 18th century, the kagema houses of Edo and Osaka were thriving businesses. Samurai came to them seeking nostalgia, the beauty of the wakashu, now commodified and safe. Merchants came seeking novelty, lured by tales of exotic and forbidden love. Even monks, expelled from their orders, found new sanctuaries here, trading sutras for songs. Each boy carried a lineage of silence stretching back generations. Each performance was a resurrection of an older sin. The city's artists captured them in woodblock prints, kagema reclining beneath silk curtains, their faces half-shadowed, their gazes serene. To the public, these images were elegance, refined, distant, tragic, but to those who lived it, they were tombstones carved in ink. "Are we not beautiful?" one boy asks his patron in a record attributed to the courtesan-turned-writer Kikuya Shinzo. The man laughs. "You are perfect, but beauty is not meant to last." The boy lowers his gaze. "Then neither are we." What was once hidden within temple walls had become spectacle under lantern light. Desire was not shamed, it was advertised, priced, and ranked. The shogunate even issued permits and censuses of pleasure workers, ensuring control under the guise of morality. They called it order, the boys called it captivity. The transformation of sin into commerce was complete. The same rituals that once justified spiritual possession now justified economic profit. Every gesture, every note of the shamisen, every glance between performer and patron was a reenactment of history's oldest transaction. Obedience for protection, body for belonging. As the century waned, voices began to fracture the illusion. A handful of escaped courtesans wrote of the suffering beneath the silk. One anonymous kagema recorded, "I was sold as a dream, but when dreams end, who wakes for us?" His words, copied secretly by a sympathetic geisha, survived in a library beneath Kyoto's streets. Western visitors to Japan, arriving at the dawn of the Meiji era, described Yoshiwara as a theater of desire. They were mesmerized by the elegance, blind to the ghosts haunting every corridor. To them, the kagema were curiosities of a fading age. To Japan's elite, they were expendable relics of a system too profitable to question. When modernization came, it did not free them. It erased them. Brothels were shuttered or repurposed. The kagema vanished from records, their names stripped from contracts, their graves unmarked. The new Japan needed purity, progress, power. There was no room for ghosts. Yet the ghosts remain. In forgotten ukiyo-e prints, their painted eyes still follow you. In kabuki plays, their gestures echo through centuries. The chigo of temples, the wakashu of castles, the kagema of Edo. They are the same story, rewritten for every generation that refused to listen. In a final image from the 1850s, an artist depicts a boy kneeling before a row of extinguished lanterns. His makeup has smudged, his fan lies broken beside him. Behind him, the dawn light creeps through paper doors, cold and colorless. The night has ended, but not the silence. Outside, the pleasure district begins to dissolve, its canals drying, its music fading. What remains is an afterimage. Beauty, suffering, and the unbearable elegance of forgetting. And in that silence, if you strain to hear through the centuries, you might still catch a whisper, faint, defiant, unending. We were here.